This jail has a capacity of about 150 inmates, and we have 230 inmates in this facility right now.
This is the Gadsden County Jail near Tallahassee, Florida.
You have bunks and you have people on mattresses on the floor.
But Walter McNeil, president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, sees the same story everywhere he goes in the United States.
How many people are in this pod?
28.
28 altogether?
Yes.
And there are how many bunks?
There's only 24 bunks.
24 bunks and 28 men.
Yes. By the time the weekend comes, you'll have about 5 or 6 more other inmates that are in here.
That's nothing compared to California. Overcrowding was so bad there, the U.S. Supreme Court called it cruel and unusual punishment, and last May ordered the state to cut its prison population by more than 30,000. Nationwide, the numbers are staggering. Nearly 2.4 million people behind bars. Even though over the last 20 years, the crime rate has actually dropped by more than 40%.
The United States has about 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's prisoners. Right? We incarcerate a greater percentage of our population than any country on earth.
Michael Jacobson is director of the nonpartisan Vera Institute of Justice, but ran New York City's jail and probation systems in the 1990s.
Now I'm looking at your report, $47,421 per inmate per year?
Correct. In states like Connecticut, Washington State, New York, it's anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000.
Yes, $60,000 a year. That's a teacher's salary or a firefighter's. Our epidemic of incarceration costs U.S. taxpayers more than $63 billion a year. The explosion in incarceration began in the early 1970s. The political response to an explosion in urban violence and increased drug use.
So tough on crime, 3 strikes and you're out, let them rot, throw away the key, all that stuff resulted in more mandatory sentencing, longer and longer sentencing.
But nothing came close to the impact of the war on drugs.
It is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
When it was announced in 1971, fewer than 40,000 people were incarcerated for drug offenses. Now it's more than 500,000. Remember the Gadsden County Jail?
How many in here for drug-related issues?
Right here.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And here's the elephant in the room. Blacks use drugs at the same rate as whites, but go to prison more. Nearly 3 out of 4 people incarcerated for drug possession are African American.
It's emblematic of the way in which race is contributing to mass incarceration.
Brian Stevenson is executive director of the nonprofit Equal Justice Initiative and a professor at New York University Law School.
How do you answer people who say, well, the people who are in prison are bad people, and if they happen to be African American, it's because there's a higher crime rate in the neighborhoods where these prisoners have come from?
Well, I'd say for many offenses, that's simply not true. Drug use is not a problem unique to the African American community. This problem is as great a problem in white communities, affluent communities. We prosecute it differently.
But we're not just talking about drugs.
In communities of color, you see devastating consequences as a result of our policies. Now, 1 out of 3 black men between the ages of 18 and 35 is in jail, in prison, on probation and parole.
Whatever the crime, if you go to the Equal Justice Initiative website, you'll see the 70-plus 13 and 14-year-olds sentenced to life in prison without parole in this country. Nearly 2/3 are children of color.
We contend is cruel and unusual punishment.
Brian Stevenson appeared before the U.S. Supreme Court last month to argue that even in murder cases, sentencing kids that young to die in prison is cruel and unusual punishment. There's that phrase again.
We can't hide from these problems much longer. We really can't.
This is not a political winner, but it's a leadership necessity in my view.
U.S. Senator Jim Webb, ex-Marine and Vietnam War hero, couldn't be called soft on crime.
If you are a violent career criminal, you deserve incarceration.
The Democrat from Virginia has tried and failed to get Congress to address the comprehensive reform he is convinced can't wait.
We can be much more adaptive in areas of nonviolent crime, in length of sentences, and particularly in what we do with people when they begin to re-enter society.
In a bad economy, just the expense of incarceration is beginning to create converts among state legislators faced with disastrous budget problems. In 2011 alone, 15 states passed significant sentencing reform legislation. Democrats and Republicans united in their determination to cut prison populations. Which is why, not far from Tallahassee, the state of Florida is building a so-called reentry center for 400 nonviolent inmates. Here they'll cost taxpayers half what the state would spend on keeping them in prison.
This is the smart way of trying to deal with our prison population.
Chief Walter McNeil.
We know that the vast majority of the people in prison are going to return to prison unless we do something different.
Doing something different at the Gadsden County Jail a few miles away means teaching prisoners basic skills they'll need when they get out.
The first one was dress to impress.
Like how to interview for a job.
Okay, if you need help with it, there are many agencies that will help you with job resumes.
Wishful thinking when non-convicts can't even find jobs? Hardliners scoff at the notion that prison education programs lower recidivism, but criminologists don't. They see education as one tool among many that can help keep people from going back to prison. At California's formidable San Quentin prison, inmates are encouraged to enroll in the Prison University Project.
We're going to start with Aristotle and poetics and pick up where we left off last time.
In a class on Greek tragedy, every man here took the plays personally.
Everything that we read, I'm an avid reader, you know, so it's one more tool that I have to keep me, I'm not going to say keep me from coming back here, because I'm going to keep me from coming back here.
But here are the statistics. More than 50% of ex-prisoners will be back behind bars within 3 years. So how to keep them from going to prison in the first place? Whether by rethinking the old lock 'em up, throw away the key mentality, or preventing crime with beefed-up policing in high-crime areas. That's exactly what the state of New York has been doing. Between 2000 and 2010, its prison population dropped by more than 13,000, nearly 20%. And guess what? The crime rate also dropped by 21%. In New York City, by nearly 30%.
No one can really explain exactly why the changing nature of the economy, changing drug use patterns, more targeted policing.
Michael Jacobson of the Vera Institute of Justice.
But one of the things we know going forward, if we want to both continue and drive down crime even further, is that increasing the size of our prison systems will not get you there.
In 2009, the number of inmates in state prisons declined by just under 5,000. It was the first drop in nearly 40 years, since 1972. Was it merely a drop in the bucket? Or the beginning of the end of our epidemic of incarceration?